Hello, everybody. It is Monday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, Assistant Sports Editor for Multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined by Brian Batko, our Steelers insider, for the Monday episode of the North Shore Drive, normally helmed by Christopher Carter, who is still on vacation. Brian, you and I were on vacation last week, but we're back in the saddle while Ray and Chris continue to enjoy their time off.
Yeah, good for them. And it's the slow time for us. We can't expect Omar Khan to sign a contract extension or make a blockbuster trade every week. So right now we're treading water a little bit, but not for much longer because training camp is right around the corner. It's, 1 week away from that Monday, a couple days before everybody shows up and reports to Saint Vincent College.
Yes, so we're going to start setting up some training camp storylines. What are we going to be watching for in Latrobe? Today we're talking about the rookies. Derrick Harmon, who's already been named a starter. What does he have to do to maintain his grip on that job? We're going to talk about that in the first segment. In the second and third segments, we're going to talk about a lot of the other guys in this draft class. Kaleb Johnson, Will Heyward, YAB Black, Jack Sawyer, some other guys at the back end of the draft class. So a lot to dissect there. Before we do, want to thank our sponsor, Edgar Snyder. More about them in a little bit. Brian, let me set up the show with the first question here and say, what's at stake for Derrick Harmon in this training camp? Is there a world where he could lose the starting job if he does not, perform well in Latrobe? Or would he not be named a starter unless they were confident he's ready for the rigor of Latrobe?
Well, just to clarify, he wasn't really named the starter in any official capacity. His position coach, the D-line coach, Carl Dunbar, said, sort of offhandedly, but also sort of decisively that, Harmon's the starter. You can write that. But Mike Tomlin isn't out here saying that. It's not printed on the official depth chart, which even when that does get released before that first preseason game, doesn't actually mean anything in its own right. But there's obviously high hopes for him from the Steelers, and to have Dunbar talking about him the way that he did, that is a little bit of a sign that, he's not going to be eased in to all of this. So I think for Harmon, I would start with, and this might seem like a trivial thing, but his conditioning is really the first factor that you're going to look at once they get out to Latrobe, because it's hot, it's sunny, it's long days. There's going to be every practice is going to start 1:55. So that sun's always going to be high up in the sky out there in Westmoreland County. And, his body transformation and some of the struggles he's had with it over the years, that's part of his story. Obviously, it didn't hold him back from becoming a first-round pick last year and having a great season at Oregon as a senior. But, shedding the baby weight was something he had to do in high school and then into college at Michigan State. So I'm sure that Mike Tomlin will be looking to see that he's not sucking wind out there when it's, day 7 and the slog is really setting in and you still have to play at a high level against veterans on the other side of the ball. And then the other thing, too, and I would say for the young D linemen, the conditioning stuff has been a problem at times for DeMarvin Leal as he tries to sort of climb the ladder as a third rounder a couple years ago. And that's always going to be, the first step that any rookie has to take. And then I think the other part of it for Harmon is really just going to be consistency. Are you flashing day in and day out? Rome wasn't built in a day. No rookie hits the ground running and is not having any growing pains at this level. But I think avoiding any of those really bad days and, the third strike here, so to speak, is an obvious one, but got to stay healthy. You get those lingering banged up type of injuries we saw with last year's rookie class, how quickly that can scuttle a promising season.
Do you think they view him as more advanced than Joey Porter Jr., Broderick Jones, even Troy Fautanu, who they loved last year but still took a more cautious approach than they seem to be taking with Derrick Harmon this year? Or is this just a situation of the need matches, what he has to offer them already, and that is why they're sounding more confident about him going into this camp than some other early round draft picks in the last couple of years?
I don't think there's a blanket answer to that. I think it's case by case, probably more seasoned, more ready than Broderick Jones was coming out of Georgia. Position wise, there's, I guess, less competition, at least high end competition, than there was for Joey Porter Jr. when he was trying to cement himself as a rookie. I think he was similar amounts of quote unquote ready as Harmon is looking back, but Troy Fautanu is another one. There were two established guys in front of him. So even though he was a pretty polished prospect by all accounts, he was flipping sides of the line. So there were some adjustments that he had to make there. And yeah, I mean, there were guys who had started at left tackle and right tackle. In Harmon's case, I think it is and this is why I do think he's going to start day one, and why Dunbar felt so confident in bestowing that upon him is it is a perfect storm of 4-year guy, played at a high level last season, has the size, has the strength already. He's not a project in those facets. And also, yeah, this is a D line that they made no bones about it this offseason. They needed to get bigger, more physical, more stout against the run to be more competitive when the rubber meets the road next season. And while they made some moves on the margins, like a Daniel Equale or even some of the guys they brought back, like Isaiah Loudermilk, Dean Lowry is back. They didn't cut him, but it all sets up for Harmon to get that first crack at it, at least.
What kind of run do you expect him to get in the preseason? Because we know that, starters tend to play a little bit less, but he's in a unique situation of, being viewed as a starter, whether it's official or not, that he's going to come in and maybe want to prove himself a little bit more in the preseason. So do you think he's going to play some of those longer amounts of snaps that we typically see rookies play, or could Mike Tomlin say, hey, it's really important that we have this guy ready for the season and handling him, like you said, on a case-by-case basis compared to some of those other guys in the past?
Well, I think it depends. I mean, if he's going out there and molly-whopping opposing right tackles and right guards and looks like the real deal, then yeah, you might be in a situation where you've seen what you need to see. If it's a little more slow going than that, then yeah, you probably would want to see more out of him than your typical starter. And plus, at that position, you're going to be rotating those D linemen once the regular season starts anyway to keep them fresh. So it's not like you're really gearing up an offensive lineman to play 100% of the snaps in 17 consecutive games as long as he stays healthy. So yeah, I would expect a healthy dose of Derrick Harmon in the preseason, unless, like I said, he gives reason for them to say, okay, we actually need to protect him a little bit. He's good to go. We're not worried about that. Let's just make sure we get him healthy into week one. We saw what happened last year with Troy Fautanu. So yeah, let's just kind of protect Harmon the way we would some of the other guys who are more entrenched on the roster.
Do you think he has a chance to fly under the radar a little bit more than these rookies we were just talking about? Because I feel like going into the last couple of training camps, Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu, Joey Porter Jr., they were kind of front of mind for a lot of people. Obviously, you had the quarterback situation playing out as the main storyline, especially last year with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields coming in here. You have that again with Aaron Rodgers. I think there's going to be obviously a lot of attention with that, but you also have these other significant moves the Steelers have made this offseason with DK Metcalf, Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith. Do you think that gives Harmon a chance to work a little bit more? I don't want to say obscurity, but just a little less maybe as a focal point than rookies have been in recent training camps?
I don't know. I mean, I think these last few drafts, they've been such meat and potatoes picks in the first round that, I mean, yes, there's always that anticipation and the excitement of what the first round pick is going to bring, even if it is an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. But I think by sort of the way you framed it there, Adam, I think Troy Fautanu and Broderick Jones were sort of flying under the radar too. If you want to call it that, these last couple of years. I think Najee Harris was the last Kenny Pickett was the last like big show of the rookie first rounders. And Najee before that, although that was a camp that wasn't even open to the public because it was at Acrisure Stadium that year in 2021. So the Steelers went through some periods of time there where the rookies, the first rounders were really under a microscope from Kenny Najee before that, Devin Bush a couple years before that, being that he was top 10 guy and they traded up for him. These last few years, I think the teams, the situations that they've been dropped into, again, are not as dire in terms of playing right away, but also, yeah, they're less glamorous positions inherently. They're that mushy middle of pick 14 to pick 21. So while there is going to be a spotlight on these guys, it's going to pale in comparison to the bigger name acquisitions this offseason. Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, all the players who I think are going to draw fans' eyes on day one.
Great points, Brian. I'm excited to talk about some of these other rookies as well here. We're going to talk about Jack Sawyer, Kaleb Johnson, YAB Black in segment 2. Before we do, we just want to thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Edgar Snyder Associates. Law firms come and go, but what law firm has been here in Western Pennsylvania fighting for injury victims for more than 40 years? It's Edgar Snyder Associates. What firm has a staff of over 130 people who live and work here? It's Edgar Snyder Associates. Law firms come and go, but Edgar Snyder is a name you can always trust. So remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. If you've been hurt in an accident, call them at 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit edgarsnyder.com. They're available 24/7, and we will be right back. Second segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner. He's Brian Batko. We're talking about the Steelers rookies and what they have at stake at training camp. We're going to be getting into Kaleb Johnson, Jack Sawyer, and YAB Black in this segment. Let's start with Johnson. Brian, are starting running back duties a realistic possibility for him by the end of this training camp and preseason? Or is a big chunk of a committee maybe the best he can hope for, given that they have a lot of options in this backfield right now?
Well, I think when you add the caveat by the end of preseason and the start of the regular season, no, I don't think he will overtake Jaylen Warren by week 1. I think from that standpoint, yes, large chunk of the committee and an ample opportunity to prove himself going into week 1 at the Jets is sort of the best case scenario for Kaleb Johnson. Having said that, I mean, I think as far as just the way his rookie season can play out, Kaleb Johnson, maybe more than any other Steelers rookie, should aim high and can aim high. I think there's very much a chance that, if he's running well right out of the gate by the end of the first month of the season, maybe he does become the de facto starter. And don't get me wrong, I don't think Jaylen Warren's going to fade away from the picture or anything like that. But it's going to be a committee, and I think Arthur Smith's going to have plenty of carries to split up and go around. But I think just for the simple fact of, okay, you lose your starting running back who was a real, featured back go-to guy in Najee Harris, less so last season, but early in his career, certainly 1A is gone. Yes, 1B could elevate himself, or there could be a new 1A, and maybe Kaleb Johnson will be that guy. He's certainly built more for that at the NFL level. I wouldn't ever dare to, dream of counting out Jaylen Warren with how hard that guy works and how hard he runs and how he proved himself so quickly in Pittsburgh. But Kaleb Johnson was a 3rd-round pick for a reason. And yeah, I think, every day he'll have an opportunity to sort of show Mike Tomlin, Arthur Smith, everybody in that building that, yeah, I can step into Najee Harris's shoes sooner rather than later.
Do you expect we're going to see a lot of him in the preseason, maybe compared to a Jaylen Warren or a Kenneth Gainwell, who might be more known commodities at this point, and that, that heavy workload might help him get a leg up, over the long run, because he's going to get a chance to see some carries in the preseason?
Yeah, I think so. But I think with running back too, I mean, you're kind of like Derrick Harmon in the first segment. You're going to have a chance to show like, okay, no, I'm good. I'm ready. I don't need to really, get a ton of reps to flash, basically. So, yeah, I mean, I think you'll see him plenty, but preseason, especially you're taking those hits as a ball carrier, that can add the wear and tear. So, I think it'll be interesting to see how Kaleb Johnson acquits himself, maybe more in pass protection and some of those finer points of playing the position, the nuances, the technique, because that's really going to be, I think, the underrated part of what Kaleb Johnson needs to show in this, first impression, honeymoon phase is, can Aaron Rodgers trust me when I'm out there next to him in the shotgun? Because if I'm a rookie and my head is spinning and there's, free blitzers coming and I don't even get a hand on him and Aaron Rodgers is getting lit up or having a slide or throw the ball away, he's not going to be very happy. And I'm going to be back on the sidelines. So that's all, it's all well and good if you're shaking off tackles from guys who are going to be stocking shelves in a few months. But, if you're showing that you're above the net game is where it needs to be as a running back, which Jaylen Warren did very early on in his career and continues to do and always gets praised for by the people who matter in Pittsburgh, then that's also going to go a long way for Kaleb Johnson getting on the field as a rookie.
Let's talk a little Jack Sawyer. I think there's been a lot of talk about his usefulness, particularly against the run. I think it's going to be difficult given that you have T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith ahead of him for him to play his way into any kind of starting role. But is there a world, Brian, where he is seeing 30, 40, 50% of the snaps, situationally?
I'm not sure. I mean, we've obviously got to see what plays out with the TJ Watt contract situation. While I wouldn't expect TJ would be, risking injury much in training camp practice anyway, if he holds in or on the off chance that he doesn't show up at all, obviously everybody gets a little bigger piece of the pie there. And I think it would matter more for the rookie Jack Sawyer than it would for Alex Highsmith or Nick Herbig to get those snaps in practice out at Saint Vincent College. So, that is going to be a role for him that, yes, situationally, certain game plans, certain opponents, you might want to see more of Jack Sawyer and even just, keeping the guys ahead of him fresh and allowing them to sort of rest a little bit more and not have that drop off. I feel like we hear about that every single year with the Steelers edge rushers when we talk about the unit as a whole. It's okay, that number 3 guy, he's way more important than you think. Even the number 4 guy is way more important than you think because you need to be able to plug someone in there when TJ Watt needs a blow. And, it's not just an automatic win for that right tackle. So that I think is, going to be the sort of best case scenario for Jack Sawyer right off the bat is, you're going to trust me as a backup. And if I do, really look good playing the run and bring that bigger body and physicality than Nick Herbig is, then maybe even I'm playing over him in certain settings, like against a Ravens team that wants to run the ball right at you. Although, hey, the Steelers don't see them for quite a while in the regular season. But, who knows what the Jets offense is going to look like this season with Justin Fields in there, quarterback Aaron Glenn as the head coach and an offensive coordinator who's never called plays at the NFL level or been in that seat. So, those will all be areas where Jack Sawyer can help himself immediately. And, we'll see what the long-term ceiling is for him. But if you aren't using him that way, then it probably didn't make a ton of sense to burn your 3rd pick in the draft on.
Yeah, do you see it as you mentioned the Nick Herbig angle. Do you see it as a straight number 3 where one or the other of them is going to come out on top? Or is it going to be you're playing the Ravens and you're going to use Jack Sawyer a lot more because he's good against what they, like to do in terms of the running game and maybe against teams that pass a little bit more? If you're in situations where you're winning and teams are having to throw to catch up, you're going to see a lot more of Nick Herbig and those pass rush skills.
I think we need to pay proper deference to Nick Herbig and what he's done so far in his career. I mean, granted, it's been short bursts at times because of injuries to guys ahead of him that allow him to start, or he's just working in that rotational role. But he has been uber productive on a percentage basis, production to snap ratio. So I don't want to vault anybody ahead of him. I think he's very much earned that number 3 role outright. But yeah, I mean, you are going to have to tinker with things in game. We always talk about running backs riding the hot hand with that. I mean, I think you can do that at times on defense as well, especially with that outside linebacker position. If Jack Sawyer is, winning his one-on-ones and he's shedding blocks and he's making plays against a team that's trying to run the ball a lot, then maybe you do sort of stick with him in that rotation. But these are all good problems to have for the Steelers, because if all of these hypotheticals that we're running through, play out, that means TJ Watt isn't missing extended amounts of time like he has. Alex Highsmith isn't missing extended amounts of time like he has. And Nick Herbig and Jack Sawyer are both healthy and playing at a high level. So that's, to me, probably what they're envisioning is, we don't have to feel like, okay, we can't go to Jeremiah Moon here as our fourth outside linebacker, or Derek Tuska, or Malik Reed when he was the number 3 guy. I think they've been trying to really improve the top to bottom depth at that position for quite a while now, and maybe they would have had a better answer a year or two ago if Marcus Golden hadn't retired or unsigned with the Steelers after training camp. Well, I guess that was last year, but they were left in the lurch a little bit with that. And Sawyer, someone who clearly they just love his makeup, his intangibles, and have a vision for what he can provide between the lines for them as well.
I guess let's get to YAB Black quickly here at the end of the segment. He seems to have kind of maybe the widest range of possible outcomes here, where I could very easily see him having a redshirt year, but I could also very easily see him, emerging as a rotational piece for this group. What do you think is at stake for him in this training camp?
I think earning any sort of trust from the coaches to get in there as a 5th rounder would be a plus for YAB Black. And he was someone who, again, he wasn't necessarily a positional need when they took him. You could argue they had other bigger needs at the time, especially because they took Harmon already as a D lineman in the 1st round. But they couldn't pass up YAB Black because he did feel like such a Steeler to them. So, show some of those Steelers type traits, even if your opportunities are few and far between, much like Harmon. Come out here, be able to have a full tank of gas from snap 1 to your last snap of training camp practices. That will impress. Again, stay healthy. Don't have any of those sort of big man nagging injuries that allow the Steelers to kind of say, okay, we trust the older guys at your position more. And, still, YAB Black, even if he does everything right, he could find himself caught in a numbers game a little bit where, if there's even one lingering health issue, kind of like Logan Lee last year, then you get the quote-unquote red shirt put on you. But I think I said this on one of the final shows with Carter. I've got higher hopes for YAB Black. I think he's somebody who can come in and make a splash right from the start, even if it is as a specialist on the D line against certain offenses, or your short yardage, you're plugging up the middle. I think he's got some stuff to him. I like him more now, having seen him in person and talked to him a little bit, than I did in the pre-draft process.
Got a few more names to get to in the 3rd segment. Will Howard, Carson, Bruner, Sebastian Castro. Before we do, just want to thank a couple more sponsors. Are you looking for a way to challenge your body and sharpen your mind? Step into something more than just a workout. Welcome to the brand new Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy at UFC Gym. Here, it's not just about training. It's about living the values of honor, discipline, and respect. Whether you're a total beginner or leveling up your skills, you'll be guided through a structured program led by a 3rd-degree black belt that builds confidence, strength, flexibility, and real technique. Head down to UFC Gym at the Waterfront or Market Square to learn more about their exclusive 3-month introductory package today. We also want to thank Boss Menswear. Boss has reached icon status for its tailoring, but offers more than the perfect suit. The collections also feature casual and athleisure pieces, presenting a complete wardrobe for a fast-paced, modern lifestyle. Tailoring and sportswear are brought together in a look that is ready for whatever the day may hold. Boss is now open in Ross Park Mall with a selection of menswear pieces. Thank you to them for sponsoring. We are back. 3rd segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Going to go rapid fire on the remaining Steelers draft picks and what they have at stake during Steelers training camp. Brian, what are the odds that we're talking about Will Howard as QB2 by mid-August? I think there's a lot of people who want you to say even money, but I suspect it's somewhat longer than that.
I'll go slightly less than 1. I would say 24%. I guess I could see a scenario where Will Howard balls out and preseason, and the Steelers are feeling their oats about finding him in the 6th round. And hey, let's just be real here. Letting guys leapfrog Mason Rudolph and sort of treating him as an afterthought. Mike Tomlin's done that how many times now in their shared relationship? And to Mason Rudolph's credit, he usually sticks with it, finds a way to kind of claw back to relevancy, and doesn't just take his ball and go home. But I only bring that up to say that's why I'm leaving a sliver of possibility there for Will Howard, even if everything that we've seen so far has given all indications that Mason Rudolph's going to be the number 2. There was no talk of those guys even splitting reps in OTAs before Aaron Rodgers got. I think even Skylar Thompson was like, quote unquote, ahead of Will Howard on the superficial depth chart for May football and shorts. But yeah, I mean, Will Howard's. It's funny. We talked at the beginning about how Derrick Harmon's almost flying under the radar. Yeah, that's partially because of the other splash moves the Steelers made this offseason. Partially because they got the quarterback from the national championship winning Ohio State Buckeyes. He's been everywhere. He's been on this podcast network with me. I mean, he's already endeared himself to this fan base, I think, because he's such a kind of laid back, likable guy with a genuine personality. And again, he won the national championship last year. Everybody watched that game against Notre Dame. So he has an outsized presence for a 6th round pick, but that doesn't mean we should have outsized expectations for where that leads him here in August.
Yeah, I believe I heard him doing a radio spot already for a local car dealership, which caught my eye, but it shows how marketable he's been for a lot of people here in the early going. So I'm going to be interested to see how he performs out in Latrobe. Brian, Carson Bruner, is he playing for a roster spot against Mark Robinson, or is Mark Robinson the one under pressure here, and playing for one of those inside linebacker spots?
Well, if you could combine Mark Robinson and Carson Bruner, you'd have Mark Bruner, Carson's dad. But yeah, I do think Mark and Bruner are probably competing for a roster spot. I mean, hey, maybe there's a world in which both guys can hang around. That would probably spell the end of Cole Holcomb and mean that his gruesome leg injury from a couple years ago is just too much to bounce back from and be the same guy that he was, or even close to it. But I don't necessarily get that vibe with Holcomb, so it's probably going to become a tough needle to thread to keep both of those guys at inside linebacker. That Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, and Malik Harrison are going to be in the mix, so they also might be competing in a sense against other players who are sort of special teams only, like James Pierre at cornerback, or I would assume Miles Killebrew as a captain is going to be back on the team, but you never know. So yeah, I think with Bruner, he's obviously going to have to make it as sort of the Tyler Matakevich replacement. But don't discount Mark Robinson. I mean, he made an impact last year. A couple forced fumbles. Those were field flipping plays. Mike Tomlin loves that from his special teams units. They preach the culture of takeaways and punching the ball out, ball searching, as they call it. Mark Robinson, whether it's lucky or good, doesn't really matter. He's made it happen. He has those on his resume. So it's not exactly an easy hill for Bruner to climb as a 7th rounder.
I want to wrap up with Sebastian Castro, the undrafted guy. Does he have a role to serious playing time, especially after the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade and with everything going on in that secondary? I think there's been a lot of hype for him, but obviously he comes in as the undrafted guy. Do you see him more as a Beanie Bishop or more as a guy who's going to be fighting for being on this roster at all?
More of the latter, I think. And, I know people started throwing him out there right away when the Steelers removed their 3-time All-Pro safety from the 2025 roster in dealing away Minkah Fitzpatrick. But being that deep guy is not Sebastian Castro's game. It's not really Deshaun Elliott's game either. So I still think he's pretty much blocked by Elliott. Miles Killebrew, while he's pretty much solely here for special teams, and that might as well be his position designation, he is still technically a safety. So, those numbers add up there. And Castro, I think the best thing for him would be to, maybe persuade the coaches or at least the coaches decide at some point to see what he has as a slot corner, because he sort of played that overhang position in Iowa's defense a lot, and that's where he made a lot of big plays, and that shows up all over his tape from last year. But now that you've got Jalen Ramsey, I think also is going to be seeing a lot of work there when the Steelers are in the nickel. So I like Castro. I thought he was a really good signing as an undrafted free agent, relatively speaking, but I could see that going either way for him to get on the roster. He might have to beat out a guy like Carson Bruner for one of those helmets devoted to special teams players. I don't know that the Steelers will see a fifth-year senior who's played a lot of ball already in the Big Ten as a developmental guy to keep around inactive on game days. So I could see him becoming a fan favorite, though, for sure. I mean, he throws his body around. He's going to play with reckless abandon in the preseason. I'm quite sure of that. And I could even see him being a little bit of a training camp darling if he picks off a pass here and there, lays a big hit. Sebastian Castro, I think, is right there at the top of that list of undrafted free agents who Steelers fans are going to have some interest in.
Looking forward to seeing all of these guys out in Latrobe. Brian, we're going to be back a lot more this week. I believe you have Chipped Ham and Football on Tuesday.
Yes.
I'll be back definitely with Jason Mackey on Thursday, and we'll figure things out for the rest of the week on North Shore Drive as we continue to wait Chris Carter's return to this seat. But thanks for chatting with us this week. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.